Welcome back to Candid Catholics. I'm Father Tom Gibbons with Maggie McKay. If you missed part one, we kicked off with some Catholic trivia, dove into toxic polarization, and chatted with Tim Busch about his background, the Napa Institute, and a few hot topics. Now we're picking up right where we left off, talking Pope Leo's challenges, Eucharistic processions, and more on unifying the church. Let's jump back in.
What do you talk about at the Institute when the topic of, the whole church and all the abuse comes up? How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Because that's a huge scandal, and it's hurt the church a lot, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. My generation, I know a lot of people who just gave up after all these scandals, and they're like, no. So what do you say
Well,
about that?
first of all, our church has had corruption for 2,000 years. And the fact that it's still standing is the sign that it's divinely created by Jesus Christ himself. But, we know everyone, all of us, other than Mary, were born with original sin. And so we've got a conscience in our soul, but we have temptations, and without grace, we fall to those temptations. And there had been so much attack by the devil to church leaders because if we take one of them down, then we take down hundreds and thousands of people. And Maggie, what you just said is the damage. People are not going to church because they don't trust the church anymore. And they have a good reason not to trust the church. But it's not about those people. It's not about Ted McCarrick. It is about Jesus Christ. And unfortunately, the way our governance in our church is set up, which is very unique to faith, we have a hierarchical organization. They have real estate and they have money. And so that's why we're a target. This abuse is going on in every public institution, every religious organization, to the same degree it's been going on in the Catholic Church. Now, it's a scandal that is going on at all, but it's a real scandal that's going on in the Catholic Church. I think the church since 2000 have made a lot of progress in rooting out this abuse. And a lot of the abuse that we're reading about happened 70 years ago. And your own diocese, Father Tom, in LA, they're facing, Cardinal Mahoney, bless his heart. I thought he settled this whole thing for $600 million 20 years ago. And now we're talking about 800 million more. Because of the statute of limitations. And the statute of limitations, which applies only to private organizations, it doesn't apply to the public institutions. That's why they're not getting sued. And you can't defend these cases. I would say 90% of them have very little support, but you can't go into a court because you can't get a jury to hear the case. You don't have any facts because the people have been dead, all the people, for sometimes 20 or 30 years. And so we're still dealing with this scandal. But I don't want to defend the scandal itself. I just want to say, folks, forget that. We're about the Church of Jesus Christ. And we need to put in protections to make sure that kids or no one is abused. And we've got other protections we need to put in besides sexual. There's financial. That's our next scandal, is the financial corruption that people are dealing with in the church and even in the Vatican. And that'll be Pope Leo's first assignment. It was Pope Francis's first assignment. He made a lot of progress in that area, by the way. But it's a challenge. And frankly, St. John Paul II, he delayed a lot of the defrocking of priests and really, and it wasn't because he was in favor of abuse. He just believed, and you'll know the right word I'm coming for, but that once a priest, always a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And so how do you defrock a priest? It's like, you can't do that. And when Benedict XVI, who had run the Congregation of Doctrine of Faith, first thing he did is defrocked 800 priests, like in his first couple of years. Now, that was because John Paul II was reticent to do that. He's a acclaimed saint, and he is a saint. So people differ on how to go about solving these problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a different understanding of priesthood. It's a because I understand, like in most people's experience, well, if you mess up in a job, you should be fired from that job, especially if you commit a crime like abuse. And I know that was like one of the big struggles was it's like, but that's not how priesthood is understood. So, but as you said, like Pope Benedict, Pope Francis really made a lot of, really broke a lot of new ground in terms of how this is addressed. So I think that kind of also just comes, what are your, one of the reasons we're doing this is, we had we're going to do 8 episodes on the conclave and the passing of Pope Francis. And we thought we're going to have more episodes to go over the conclave, but the conclave was so quick that we had 2 bonus episodes. We're like, all right, so we thought let's bring in a variety of voices and just say, what are your hopes for the church with Pope Leo going forward? What are your hopes, expectations?
It's been, this has been amazing. When you entered the conclave, I went through a few panels from guys like, John Allen and, inside the Vatican type of people. And one of the things John said, which is what everybody else said, so I'm not blaming John. If you think we're going to get an American Pope, you can just forget that. It's not happening. Okay? That's 48 hours before they elect an American Pope. And everybody goes, hey, you must know this guy. And I'm going, I really don't. I didn't even know he existed until the conclave was being approached, and his name was bannered about out there as one of the possibilities. I'm going like, are you kidding me? I've never heard of this guy before. I know every cardinal in America. And let me tell you something. The Holy Spirit brought this Pope to us. I've talked to the cardinals, and of course they can't talk about what went on, but everybody from Cardinal Tobin to Cardinal McElroy to Cardinal Gregory to Cardinal Dolan, they said, we didn't know what was going on. This thing just popped out and boom. I'm now reading he got 100 votes out of 133. That has to be a record. So we needed a Pope that was going to unify us. And I think Francis had a role. One of it was to reform the Curia and reform the Vatican finances. And he did his darndest. I think he did some, the Vatican Bank today is not a laundry machine like it was. But there's still a lot of corruption, and he just ran out of steam. And it's the inside Vatican Curia. And I'm very pleased because this Pope is not from the Curia. He was in the Curia for 17 months, but he wasn't grafted onto the Curia. And, Benedict, as good of a soul as he was in the Curia for 25 years. He witnessed.
What is the Curia for people who don't know?
The Curia would be the inside the Vatican, officials who either run dicasteries or been part of dicasteries, being the Congregation for Doctrine of Faith, the Congregation for Bishops, Congregation for Religious. And these are people that are cronies. It's not in a bad sense. I'm not trying to attack anybody that's in the Curia. My good friend Cardinal James Harvey has been in the Curia for his entire career, 50 years. So, but we needed somebody from the outside who didn't have any favors they had to pay back, to come in with a fresh set of eyes, who has leadership, who has strong discipline, and who, is a well thought out person. And this Cardinal Prevost he fills the bill. And I'm very excited about his papacy. It will be the only papacy that I likely will witness for the rest of my life since I'm older than him, assuming he doesn't pull the 85 out card, which he could. But if he lives a natural life, he's in great shape. And, we haven't seen a Pope like that, who's since John Paul II at age 58 was installed.
Yeah.
And then he shortly got Parkinson, he got shot, and his papacy was not good in the last 6 years.
It's like he was like the both and, with Prevost, where it's like he was the American who wasn't an American. So I like there was many people. So Sister Bernadette Reese was someone else saying, I think it's going to be a long conclave and it's probably not going to be an American, and then also, but that's where like, oh, he's an American, but he spent so much of his priesthood in Peru. But then
Right.
so many, I think I mean, Benedict was part of the Curia, but John Paul, I can't remember. John Paul, was he part of the Curia when he was
No,
elected? John Paul
no,
II,
no.
maybe?
He went to the
Yeah.
Angelicum, but that was only an experience. So he was not in the Curia. No, he
Yeah.
was out of
Yeah.
nowhere. As you know, they killed the first John Paul II, I think.
Right.
Bert
Well,
Paul,
Pope
John Paul
Leo,
first.
Pope Leo, like you said, with Peru and working with all the people, and like 50% of Latino immigrants in the U.S. identify as Catholic. So, what should the Vatican, what role should they play as far as what's going on right now with ICE raids, et cetera? I mean,
Yeah.
Pope Leo
Uh,
has spoken out somewhat, but
yeah. Well, I think he's gotten a quick start on all the major topics. But let's go to immigration. But by 2050, they claim, I mean, claiming one thing and what's going to happen is going to be another. The 85% of American Catholics will be Hispanic origin, not necessarily born in a Hispanic country, but of Hispanic origin. And so I think he's going to be great. Look, we got a problem with immigration. We can't just open borders and drop 21 million people in and then expect that everything's going to be hunky dory. On the other hand, deporting 21 million people, and really that's over and above the 12 that were here, that come in over the last several decades since Ronald Reagan gave amnesty in the 1980s. So we've got 33 million people here that are illegals, right? And so the Pope has been very clear, we must accept these people into our society. But I'm not an expert in immigration, but I tell you, I do these CEO forums with my employees, and I have many Spanish speakers. And I did one in Dallas about 2 weeks ago, and we had several people from Central and South America. Most of the immigrants that work for me are from Mexico. But over the last few years, during the Biden administration, these folks have come in from Central and South America through Mexico, but they weren't from Mexico. And they, I'm seeing it real time. I know these people are not here legally.
what about the people they're deporting that do have papers and aren't getting the due process? What about them?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's well, first of all, that's a violation of our Constitution, and that needs to stop and be stopped
happening.
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but my point is, what about the people and they focused on this in the news, hospitality, farming. Nobody wants these jobs, folks, and construction. The biggest problem we have with immigration is we need to regulate it. We need to make sure we're not getting axe murderers into our society. We need to make sure they're not spies, like we just uncovered with the Chinese and Iranians and all this that we're uncovering through our search. Now, that said, we have a job. We need to come up with a method of getting people into our country legally and not waiting 10 years to get into the country. If we did that, we wouldn't have this kind of problem. And we've got to have people to be able to go back to their countries of home origin and visit their families, in many cases, their own children, minor children that they're supporting in America, and not worry about getting caught at the border on the way back. We can solve this problem. Eye recognition, you go to the airport, you take a picture, within less than 1 second, they know who you are and that you're boarding on this plane. Why can't we do that with immigration? Because it's a political football and nobody wants anybody else to take credit for fixing it. And we've got to reduce the polarization of our society. In the meantime, President Trump and the Trump administration has to deal with 21 million people, and some of them are bad actors, that got in here because there was no methodology to supervise how they came and how they left.
I always saw President Bush, the second President Bush, had no relation, of course.
Yeah, no relation.
Always had like a good perspective on like the guest worker program. I've spent time volunteering at the border of El Paso many, many years ago, with a group called Annunciation House. And it's in many ways, it's like working in that area has really kind of helped solidify a lot of aspects of my faith and how I approach it. But you're talking about with the polarization is how do we move forward? Because nobody wants to touch it. But I also feel like it's sometimes there's issues that nobody wants to touch because they like to beat other people over the head with it. And in the meantime, it's like, no, some real people are suffering along the lines of this because we're not having the conversation, because we're not willing to kind of say, all right, what's a compromise or what's a solution here, and working that out.
We have a solution. It's very simple. Number one, just so I'm on the record, I am 110% pro-immigration. This is how our country was built. And we did all this battling with the Irish and the Italians 100 years ago, and now they're the fabric of our society. And people from Central America will be the fabric of our society. You know that 70% of all, I think it's 70%, it's a large percentage of all CEOs of tech companies were born in India. We got to get more of these people, because they're doing an amazing job. But we don't have a methodology of even how to immigrate people of capabilities. But every single Indian contributes like $5 million to the GDP. And one of our solutions to debt is GDP. As long as the debt is less than 100% of GDP, which is not right now, it's 37 million, GDP is 21 and a half. We're a socialist country. If we can grow GDP to 42 trillion, and have debt at 37, we'll probably start paying the debt off too because of a higher GDP. So immigrants are not a drain on society. They're a contribution to society. And so what is the big deal here? Why can't we just figure this out and stop using the political football? And so that's what I would challenge the Trump administration is, now that you've closed the borders, which they've done, now let's get the borders open legally. Because if you interview 80% of the people in the world, according to Mike Milken, which he's a pretty smart guy, 80% of the people in the world want to live in the United States of America. I'm not making this up. And the reason is because as bad as our country is, as corrupt as our country is, you got to look at where they're coming from. I mean, Venezuela, the guy has completely destroyed, and his successors, that country was the richest country in South America. It's now the poorest country in South America. I had a guy in my interview 2 weeks ago from Haiti. Talk about a country that's messed up. Yep. And what a fine man. I don't know if he's here legally or not. He speaks English because Haitians speak English. So that won't, it's more of an English, England type of accent. But the others, they're from Central America. They have no clue about English, none, zero. And fortunately, I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to, be able to, without translator, to be able to talk to them. So I have to use a translator. But I love my immigrants and I love our immigrants. I think we just need a way to curate them.
Yeah. And largely, and the funny thing is that's the stance of the USCCB, the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. What's our Catholic response to be? It's like, how do we take care of our brothers and sisters, and how do we have rational policy that just makes sense for everybody? That makes sense for our home country and does justice to everybody. So,
Tim, being a very successful businessman, of course, as you are, how do you marry your Catholic values with the business world? Because it's so competitive and, a lot of shenanigans go on. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think it was amazing. Last night I was sitting next to an employee. We had a little dinner here in Hawaii, and she runs the spa, and it's new. She's only been here for 2 months, and I wanted to sit next to her because I didn't know her. And she's from Mexico. I'm sure she's probably legal. She's been here for a long time. And she said, "You know why I came to work for your company?" And I go, "No." And she was wearing a crucifix. And she said, "Because I read about your faith, commitment to faith." And I would say that's actually ends up being a benefit a detriment. I do not, anybody wants to Google, you just did. No, I'm trying to do the best I can to incorporate the faith. And not everybody is obviously Catholic or even Christian. And I have people from all walks of life, from, same-sex relationship, marriages, transgenderism, atheism, whatever. But I do begin everything like I did last night, a prayer. It's a Christian prayer for the meal. And at every event that I begin with the prayer. And not once in 25 years that I've been doing it have I even received an email or a suggestion I might not want to do that again, or a letter. I've only gotten 100% positive reaction. People running up to me and say, I'm never going to leave this company. Nobody has faith in their business like you guys do. And so I think this is what Legatus taught me. This is what Legatus was formed for. And I took a hook, line, and sinker because I believe, first of all, it's the right thing for me to do to carry out my faith. God has given me certain gifts, and the only way to share them is with your associates and to look out for them. It's the right thing to do culturally. I mean, if somebody dies or gets sick, we have a mass, or we go to the funeral, or we go visit, we call up the employee. It's the right thing to do. And I think this idea that faith and business don't mix is totally made up by the devil. And I was at a religious conference, a faith-based business conference at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. If you haven't been, listeners, go to the Museum of the Bible. It's amazing. Created by the Green family, $1 billion investment. But anyway, they have conferences there. And the CEO of Coca-Cola. Now, I think Coke would be one of those companies that I would check the box. This guy got up there and said, I have 17 chaplains, Protestant and Catholic chaplains, on Coca-Cola's payroll to minister to his employees. And he goes, if somebody tells you you cannot have a chaplain in your public company, tell them Coke has 17 of them. And he said, by the way, I wasn't always that way. He said, 10 years ago, I prohibited that type of thing. And my wife and my employees said, we need faith. We got people struggling and they need spiritual help. And he goes, I'm the poster child for telling you you can have that. And so we're seeing this across the country. Walmart, Bible studies, Amazon, Bible studies. This is a movement nobody's broadcasting. We're winning and they're losing. And I think this is going to make our country great. And, the young people that I'm hiring in their 20s, they're about mission. They're about purpose. They're not just about how much money I can make. I mean, I've got people taking jobs for less money so they can be in a mission-oriented organization.
Well, yesterday, Father Tom and I were talking about younger people coming to Mass, and that you see more coming to daily Mass, right, Father? And we were trying to figure out why.
I am. I'm seeing part of it. Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting what you said. Maybe you want to share about why you think younger people are coming back to daily Mass, not just Sunday.
I think my generation grew up. I grew up in the Northeast, so I grew up in a very culturally Catholic area. And I think faith was just kind of a given in the culture. And I think there was, the previous generation had started kicking the tires on faith a lot more, whether it was post-Vatican II or just more communication or whatever, or just the fact that we all had to, because we're becoming more of an international society, we all had to live with one another. So we're all figuring this out. So I think my generation, we had faith as a given, but we were interested in being more questioning. But I think just over the last, especially with pop culture and just the dynamics of the last 100 years of just media just coming at us from all these different elements, that my pet theory is for hundreds of years, most people could usually expect to live a very similar life to how their parents lived, to how their grandparents lived, how their great grandparents, whether they lived on the farm or they lived, worked in the town or whatever that is. And I think now things are just changing, people's music changes, music changes, fashion changes, everything, technology is changing. I'm considered an old guy because I'm like, oh, I have to learn with this. Confound it. What is this AI thing? Which I still have a lot of questions about. But with all this change, I think a lot of people are looking for stability, and that's one of the things that many of the traditions of the church can offer is like a sense of stability. When everything else changes, this is something that's been here for 2,000 years. And then, of course, but it's also supposed to point towards the ultimate sense of stability is God as revealed through Jesus. So I think that's a big attraction and just where I sometimes think like Gen X, like we were ironic, but we knew what we were being ironic about because we were still part of it, where like maybe the millennials and the Gen Zs don't know that. They're just being, and so it's that we had an experience of the floor where now it's just like, I'm not sure if as many people have the experience of the floor. So I think there's more people working. That's my armchair sociologist take on the last couple of,
I think I preach to everybody I can. There's 3 simple things you do in your life, and they're 100% success rate. 1, go to Mass daily, pray the rosary daily, and go to confession at least monthly. If you do those 3 things, the devil can't touch you. He can't touch you. He has no ability to pierce through that veil of grace that you get from doing those 3 things. And this is what we do in the Catholic faith is we make it too complicated, too nuanced. And I think if you can stick to those 3 things that our church offers, and no other church offers that, you are going to, through the grace of the Holy Spirit, do great things. I look back, I feel like Pope Leo when he took the ring. I look back and I look at the Napa Institute and I go, where did this come from? It's not me. Where did it come from? Daily Mass, rosary, confession every month, and confession immediately if you commit anything close to a mortal sin. And that's where it came from. That's where it came from. Everything that I've been given comes from that. And I wouldn't know how to create the Napa Institute. It's through God's grace. And Leo realized when you saw the ring, go look at that. And Tagli's putting the ring on him. He breaks down. He realizes he's now the vicar of Christ. He's Peter. He goes, how did this happen? How did it happen? And his family are all running around. Oh, yeah, I used to play Mass when he was a kid. We all knew he was going to be the Pope. I used to play Mass when I was a kid. I'm not the Pope.
Well, on the other side of that, I absolutely did not play Mass when I was a kid. And I'm like, and I'm not saying I'm going to be the Pope. I feel fairly confident, unless God says otherwise, I'm not going to be the Pope. But,
We play communion with Necco wafers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I did
Mass.
Eucharistic processions in my front lawn in Michigan. And I was born in a house. I just saw his house, by the way. I thought it was a similar house to mine, but it's a lot smaller. My home was 1,200 square feet, 6 kids. I just looked at his house. It looks like a studio. I told the guy, I want to buy that house. My wife says, why are you buying a house in the middle of Chicago? I says, hey, the Pope lived in it. It's a 3rd-class relic. And they said, oh, that's too bad because the Vatican's already put an offer in to buy it, which is good for them. They should own it. But seriously, that's why I have a passion for Eucharistic processions. And I think that is one of the greatest things that's going on in this country. And if we had any part in it, I'm very honored to be part of that group. But we started Eucharistic processions at Napa 15 years ago in 2011, and then culminated in doing the one in New York where we get 6,000 people, 18 million views one year of the procession. And, this is a way of evangelizing. And you say, what are you talking about? You're walking around, you got 6,000 people in the procession in downtown New York, Times Square, and you're walking with Jesus. And you, well, yeah, but you're not saying anything. You're singing some hymns, but you're not saying anything. You don't need to say anything. Jesus will take care of everything. You just have to believe that is Jesus in that monstrance. And we are walking the streets of Times Square with that monstrance. And they just had one in Los Angeles. I was very disappointed, I'll say, that they, because of the violence, they didn't take it offside the campus. We should take Jesus with us. In October 11th, 2023, 4 days after the attack of Hamas on Israel, I walked out of St. Patrick's with 3,500 of my closest friends. And in the streets, there were thousands of people. And the chaplain for the New York Police Department walked up to me and said, Tim, we're going to have to change the route because the Jews are processing from the United Nations to Times Square, where there's 15,000 Palestinians, and there's going to be violence breaking out here. And I looked at the chaplain. I don't know where I got this from, but I said, we are going, even if we die. And Jesus was a Palestinian. He was a Jew, but he founded the Catholic Church. And we're going to go to where they're going. And there's not going to be any violence. And there wasn't. We went right through Times Square, and there were Star of Davids all over the place. There were Palestinians all over the place, and there was no violence to be had. And 18 million people watched that video of that procession that year, and it was like no other. Because in 24, we only had 1.8 million, which is a big enough amount, but 10x did it because of the emotions. This is a holy war. Let's be honest about it. It's unfortunately, 50,000 people are dead that had nothing to do with this war. But it's a holy war. It's an attack by the devil on the chosen people of Israel. And unfortunately, Hamas and all these people that are not good actors are ruining good Palestinian people. And it's a travesty. But we need to realize it's spiritual warfare, and the only way to cure it is through faith. And I'll be happy to have on my tombstone that I died in a Eucharistic procession trying to bring peace to the world. That will be an accomplishment, not a dishonor.
Why do you think it's so hard to make change in the church? Why is that? Why do you think?
The change in doctrine, if that's what you're alluding to, is not changeable. This is what Pope Francis struggled with, whether it dealing with married priest or things that we talk about, the teachings. They're based fundamentally on the Bible, and they don't change. And so we have to understand that is in place. Now, the way we reveal ourselves and how we go about, with our faith, that does change over time. Liturgies change. I mean, the Novus Ordo liturgy, which came from Vatican II, it wasn't really promulgated by Vatican II, but Father Tom, you probably know better than I, but I remember in the 1970s when I was young, late 60s, early 70s, I was an altar boy since I was 5, where all of a sudden Mass went to English. I'd done the Tridentine Mass until I was age 11. And that was a change,
See, for me, it wasn't a change because I was born in 72. So for me, I was like, I forget how old I was. So I was just like, what do you mean we used to do this in Latin?
So, but I think getting back to your question, Maggie, we can't change the teachings on anything like abortion. And, I was a pro-death penalty guy. I'm against the death penalty. I get the whole concept that, you start killing people, then why don't we kill them when they're too old and they're, I'm against euthanasia too. But I'm a convert to that principle. I was brought up by a family that was pro-death penalty. There were some bad actors out of there. We got to get rid of them. And, so I think Francis made some headway in that regard, but there's nothing actually morally wrong with a death penalty, according to many of my spiritual scholars, but I happen to be against it because I think it's just another door to say, well, if you kill people, why don't you kill them when they're sick and they want to be killed and all that business. So I do think the church is we are going to be the last stance of morality in the world. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church is the moral compass of society. Everything evolves around its teachings. And the USCCB, their job is to remind the government as to what they're doing and how it doesn't align church teaching. Immigration happens to be their mainstay. I don't think that we ought to be taking money from the government and taking care of immigrants. We should be taking care of immigrants with our own money, not with the government's money. And I'm fully supportive of the killing of USA to the US bishops, because we should have never been taking that money in the first place. We should be doing it with our people. And this is the great thing about America, is we can take care of each other without the government getting involved. And we can do it in a much more efficient way, much more effective way, because we can do it at 20 cents on the dollar, because the government also can't discriminate. They got to give money to bad actors. We can hold people accountable through subsidiarity because we know who they are. And but are we going to change teaching on same-sex marriage? I don't think so, but that would be a change if that's the change you're talking about.
Well, like having nuns maybe as priests or at least deacons, things like that.
I think Francis did a major move on embracing women. He now allows them to be head of dicasteries. The curia we were talking about, heretofore, if you weren't a priest, you could not be the head of a dicastery. And normally every head of a dicastery is made a cardinal in the curia. They're a curia cardinal, but they're a cardinal. They're a voting cardinal. James Harvey was the head of St. Paul's Side of the Walls, became cardinal. And so now not only women can be a head of a dicastery, a lay person can be a head of a dicastery, which is very novel. I was always in favor of married priest. I didn't become a priest because I couldn't be married. But I totally, and I'm open to hear other people's opinion on this idea, but the priests that I know, and I know hundreds of them, they've convinced me that not being married is the way to go. Now, we have married priests in the Catholic Church, as Father Tom knows. We have Orthodox Catholics that are married. We have the ordinariate, people that were Anglican, were married in the Anglican rite, and then they became Catholic. They keep their wives and their kids. We don't tell them. That was Benedict XVI, one of the most conservative popes of our time. He was the one that instituted it.
Why do the priests say it's better to leave it the way it is?
They're committed as a priest to their people, and they believe that by having a family and a wife, there's always going to be a conflict in their commitment to their people. Now, I challenged a bishop 40 years ago and said, if you're a CEO of General Electric, which at the time was a big company, and you have a wife and kids, you got a bigger job than a priest, in a parish. So how do you get away with doing that and not being able to be a priest? And he didn't really have a good answer, but I think it's a more spiritual. It's a sacrifice. It's definitely a sacrifice to give up a marriage and a family. I feel guilty when I get around priest, and I've got 2 kids and 11 grandkids, and I'm feeling like, they aren't jealous of me. They love that. That's part of the Catholic faith. But I saw one of my young priests, he's 40 years old, giving testimony to a guy that says, why I'm not Catholic? Because they won't let you guys he was a Venezuelan. They won't let you guys get married. And this priest just gave it to him in a very kind, charitable way. He said, I don't want to be married. I'm happy what I'm doing. I'm very joyful. And I say, by and large, Father Tom, all the priests I know, they're some of the happiest people I know, as far as being joyful about, they have no money, of consequence. Paulist priests, don't you guys take a vow of poverty like most religious? Is that true?
What we do is we take a promise of biblical simplicity, because we call us, the quick hand answer for us is I always say we're a religious community, but technically we're a society of apostolic life. So what we do is we make promises. So the kind of how that's lived out a little bit differently is it's mostly lived out as a vow of poverty, but the subtle difference is not that my parents have a lot of money, but if for whatever reason
They gave you money,
my mom
yeah.
passed away and wanted to leave me some money, that money would be mine. Now, of course, I would want to give some of that to the community, but that's kind of like the subtle difference where if you have like a Jesuit or Franciscan, it's like you own nothing and we provide everything. So it's a subtle difference, but it's kind of the same. I mean, the funny thing is, sometimes I say like I even sound weirdly saying that I live this promise of biblical simplicity because, the people I've been exposed to, the opportunities I've been exposed to, there's just been so much grace and different opportunities that I'm like, whoa, it's almost been way above whatever pay grade I'm making technically on one level from a worldly level. But then there's also, there's that grace of community too, of being part of having brothers, of literally, I really felt it during the pandemic of really like, oh, I've got a larger community that I can lean on when so many people are living lives of solitude, irrespective of marriage. I think there's, my kind of personal opinion on that is I think for religious people in communities, I totally agree that married priests wouldn't work. I think for diocesan, I think an argument could be made. But I just depend on their lifestyle and however more. Also, just so because I think maybe I'm just thinking of this too practically. We need more priests. So if a lot of them want to get married, I'm like, all right, that'll help spread the sacraments around. But that's just my own little.
Well, we have deacons, and we've got more married deacons than we have priests in the country right now.
It's amazing.
And they can do everything but consecrate, right? I mean, pretty much everything a priest can do.
Confessions and anointing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They can't hear it.
And even if we weren't to do that, like a part of it, and I know this is more complex because now we're getting really into the inside baseball of this, but I think it would be great if deacons could at least anoint the sick. I think that would really be a great thing. But I also know with anointing the sick, there's the hearing of confessions, and that's only assigned to the priest.
Apostolic blessing, right?
Yeah, the apostolic blessing. So. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking time with us.
Thank you.
Yes. See if Maggie can come to our August 21st salon dinner.
She's set to.
Thank you.
She is set to.
You. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Then I'll get to know you better there.
Okay.
She's on the list, and I actually have one or two more names for you that all of a sudden. I know it's kind of late rounding up people, but all of a sudden people are getting back to me finally. So I think we're gonna have a nice crew in August.
Good. Very good.
And one of the reasons these dinners do not devolve into a food fight, as they could have in other circumstances, is because the food is so good that even if we wanted to throw food at somebody, it would just be a waste. So
exactly.
Well, speaking of the salon dinners, Tim, it seems like some form of bending may be necessary for conversations to be truly effective in bridging ideological gaps. Do you think there needs to be, say, acknowledgement on both sides that they may not have the full story and that everyone views doctrine through the lens of their personal experience?
I think it's more about making friends, and you can't hate friends. You may not agree with friends, but you can't hate friends. And through social media, and we've said the most outrageous things to people in public forum. It's one thing to dress somebody down in a private forum, but dress them down on the American media. I mean, the sitting president does that on a regular basis, which is very unfortunate. But that's what it's about. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I think the Holy Spirit will take care of that. I think that I'm not viewing my faith through my personal lens, because I've already said I've changed on the death penalty. I didn't really have a position on immigration. I now have, I think, a very strong, healthy one. I changed on abortion because, not that I was very young when I would have taken the position that abortion seems okay. So that has all happened through the teachings of the church. I mean, I don't agree with everything the church says, but I do listen to it, and I try to pray about it. And I think, Maggie, one of the greatest things that I've seen happen was summed up in a gentleman who runs a lay apostolate in Washington, who would be a progressive, walked up and put his arm around me. He goes, we're both 70 years old. And he goes, I've hated you for 10 years and I've never met you before. He says, this is
Wow.
terrible. You know, we need to
Wow.
stop the hatred. I mean, what Jim Martin goes through in the press is despicable. I mean, it's despicable. Now, people can say, I don't agree with James Martin, this, that, and the other thing. I don't agree with James Martin on a lot of things. But what they say about him makes what they say about me child's play. I mean, it's really horrendous. And people should be ashamed of themselves for despising a person, especially a person of the cloth, who, has done a lot of good for conversion. I mean, if you read his books, they're some of the best written books on spirituality that are in the domain. And everybody on the right and the left agrees to that. So why are we, chastising the author? I mean, yeah, he gets it. He gets a lot of this through the Spirit, but I mean, he's the medium. And so I think I'm not trying to change people's ideas about same-sex relations and same-sex marriage. I have a family member, a brother who's same-sex relation. He's in my business, but I'm not in favor of it. But, a lot of the people sitting around the table are, and some of them are in the relationships. So, I'm trying to make sure, I'm evangelizing them and bringing them closer to God, but God's going to have to convince them of whatever he wants to convince them of.
And like going along with that, because one thing how has this year and a half been for you? I mean, well, I guess you've been doing the salon dinners a little bit longer than that. But
No,
how
it's
is,
about
yeah. How is this experience? What have you learned? How have you changed? And it's not like, just more of like a spiritual journey thing. Like, how has this affected you? I know it's affected me in different ways. I think there are times, like what kind of blowback have you gotten? What kind of, response have you gotten?
It's all been positive.
Mm-hmm.
Really super positive. It's brought great joy to me. And I think I was the obvious candidate because I was the most chastised into the right wing corner. And I think that someone from that area, which I probably am more moderate, I'm not a Latin mass guy. I'm not a homeschool guy. By the way, I'm all in favor of all those kind of people. I think they're the greatest people in our church. I just don't happen to be one of them. I'm kind of a relevant guy. I mean, speak of resources, I have nice cars, nice houses, multiple houses. I'm not living, what do you call biblical simplicity? I'm not living that. I do donate a lot of money.
You don't live in the cave in the Meritage? You don't live in that,
If I did, it wouldn't be simple because the cave is beautiful. So I have you could look at me and not know anything about me and think I'm just one of the old, guys running around making money and spending it. But I really think, Maggie, this is not about trying to convert people ourselves. That's what we've been doing, and it's not working out for us. And I think we have to lead by example and, if necessary, speak. And I think that's what I'm all about. And by the way, I'm learning for other people and what they do, and I'm like humbled by the fact they're doing more than I am. Many of them have given up all their resources because they're not earning any income working for apostolate or meager sum, and I'm out there doing both. I get to work for Napa Institute. I get no pay, but I don't need it, and so that's not really a big sacrifice as some of my friends have done leading some of these other initiatives. I mean, they're beggars. They have to beg for their money to pay for their apostolate. And so I don't think it's a quick and dirty. I think this is a a movement that I don't intend to limit to my salon dinners, the Napa Institute salon dinners. I want to inspire people to do the same in their own lives. And maybe many people have. They asked me, how do you do this? How do you invite people over to your house that hate you? And the secret weapon is you got to have James Martin and Father Tom and others that are helping you, that are telling people this is not a trap. We're all tribal. Oh, well, we step over there, and if we're seen with James Martin, then somebody's going to really, think, hey, I speak openly about the relationship that I have with James Martin. And I think it's doing a lot for James Martin's persona, because they figure it must not be as bad as everybody says he is. And that's because he isn't. And I think the same is true for James Martin to be associating with me. His tribe's got to be, a little nervous, but he says that everybody calls him, and I know they do, and says, are you sure I'm supposed to go to this? And they go, yeah, you got to go. You got to go. And without that encouragement, I'd be sitting there with a bunch of my tribe and there'd be nobody else there. Right. And I think that's what God put us in touch. This was no accident that I used to go to the parish because I lived at Columbus Circle. St. Paul the Apostle was my parish. Okay. So I've been going there for 20 years. Now I moved. Now I have a different parish. But I went to that church every single day. I was in New York City every single day, usually 7:30 a.m. mass, sometimes a midday mass. And so I knew that parish, and I didn't know James Martin lived there, and I didn't know, the Paulist priest. I saw they preached, every day there'd be a different Paulist priest doing the mass. So, I was comfortable, and I think that God brought us together. This isn't the devil working. The devil didn't bring us together.
I mean, that was what was kind of amazing, because how we got into it, so to speak, is every 4 years when we elect a new president of the community, we gather together as a community and we gather lay collaborators and we say, so what's on people's minds? Like, what are people struggling with? And we ask lay people, and what are we hearing in the pews, and what are we hearing in the rectory? And polarization, just the how we talk to one another, was really that concern. Not so much what do people disagree on, but how do we go about disagreeing? That's what was really coming up. And then so we started this, and so with Father Ricky Manalo, who you've been doing a lot of work with, I know, Tim, and and he really helped take a major leadership role for the Paulist Fathers in that. And so we started this. We were going to have this big gathering in Vegas. Because if you want to gather people from all across the country, Vegas is the place to do it. And then when you heard about it, that's when you reached out to us, and it was like, wow, it just seemed like, if we're talking about stereotypes, if you're considered to be more from the right wing of the church, and we're considered to be more from the left wing of the church, it was just interesting to kind of see how the Spirit was working, like on both sides of the balloon, so to speak. So it was, it's been a really great witness to see grace operating in the world like this. And in many ways, that's what church is always supposed to be. Church has always been like that third space where people who are not the same gather together, and we have fewer and fewer of those spaces, particularly in our digital life, that being able to kind of create these spaces like salon dinners and open spaces for conversations, or gatherings in Las Vegas,
Or a cave in Napa.
Or a cave in Napa, I think I think it just almost having the conversation is its own prophetic witness. It's like what you were saying with the, with the Eucharistic adoration and the procession through New York. It's like the action itself does the speaking. We don't need the extra words. Like the grace that's the grace that's operating, that's what's doing the speaking, not whatever clever talk we happen to give at that moment. So it's been a real blessing. So thank you for all that work, and for all you're continuing to doing in that area.
Grateful. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak today. Goodbye. God bless.
Bye.
All right, take care.
That was very eye-opening. I learned a lot. How about you?
Yeah, no, I've been learning a lot from, I've been learning a lot from becoming more involved with Napa, more involved with Tim, and I think one of the many things I've learned is what Tim talked about is it's just like, we create these demons in, this person's that we read about on the internet must be the devil, therefore they're the devil, and he was kind of talking about that from both sides, which I thought was interesting about someone being considered to be the devil, according to the online world. And then, having him sit down with people and meet people with whom, he wouldn't disagree with. But I think it's one of the many things I've realized is that there is a structure for how we're processing the world. And it's kind of a lot of the disagreements that we have in our church, in our culture, they're the surface. They're the surface disagreements, but what's going on underneath? And I'm realizing, there's like kind of like a whole other philosophical or theological system going on underneath all of that. And it's almost like that's where some of the disagreements are coming from. But when we actually start engaging on that level a little bit more, we find what some of the agreements are. So it's not to say that the surface things aren't as important or are unimportant. I don't mean to say that, but it's kind of like they start working themselves out. Like when we start getting a better sense of like, what's the underlying operating system? My kind of quick way of describing this, and you can tell me if this is the case, Maggie, having been married for so many years, if a husband and wife start arguing and getting into a big fight about who was supposed to pick up more milk in the refrigerator, the argument's usually not about the milk.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Correct. Yes. And like he said, you can't hate your friend because now you know them. So you can have disagreements or not agree on everything. But once you know somebody or hear where they're coming from, I guess, which I guess is the point of those dinners, correct?
And what I appreciate about what he was saying and is, I can understand for many in the audience, he was offering a worldview that might be very different from a lot of people in the world. And I think that was kind of part of the point is, he probably went to some places that I may not have agreed with. But one of the things that I found him to be a very honest broker, which is as I get older is what I value more and more in life. It's like, are you just an honest broker for where you're coming from? And what I've appreciated about him and what I think a value I'd like to really hold up for all of us is to kind of say, look, it's not my job to convert you. It's not my job to argue you into seeing how correct I am. And kind of being willing to say, yeah, no, I disagree with him on this, this, and this, and we're gonna have dinner tomorrow night, and it's great,
right?
It's that kind of that we almost haven't been in our online debate world. We almost have to relearn that value or relearn that ability to do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, it was. Yeah. It's interesting to hear other people's perspectives. Whether you agree with them or not.
Right. Right. And that's kind of like part of, I thought it was great when he even said, like, I don't even agree with everything in our church. I'm struggling with things in our church. And I think sometimes the stereotype of the right winger is that they don't have any questions or they don't have any. And right. Sometimes we meet people who completely live up to the stereotype, and that's why we have the stereotype. Right. And then other times you're like, oh, okay, this person's forcing me to look at my own backyard a little bit more and just say, oh, okay. Right. And maybe, but to understand more that we're not, at the end of the day, we're human beings. We are not our positions.
True. Good one. Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah.
On that
it doesn't mean that we don't have things to argue about. It doesn't mean that there aren't real concerns, and that it's a lot of people have been asking about, like, what are the role in the women in the church, and what and with the abortion question, I have sometimes believe that it's we're almost having two different discussions where we're talking about the sanctity of life in the womb, but also what are the needs of women, and sometimes I feel like we don't have those. We're having those conversations with different things, and we never kind of meet together. Even when he was talking about immigration and some of the things, one of the values we're trying to get behind and again, it's not going to disagree. It's not going to say that we're all going to agree, but I think that's kind of like an ongoing challenge. It's just good to have people willing to have that conversation. So
Yeah. So we have one more episode, Father Tom.
Yes.
This season.
The idea is we had 2 more episodes left, and we said, wouldn't it be good in this time of polarization that we had somebody talk about where are some of the people who are more right and conservative in the church coming from, and what are their hopes for a Leo pontificate? Now, Tim has been a really great representative of that. He's been a really great partner. So I thought, okay, so for our last episode, we'll do the other half. So if there's someone who would be considered to be more progressive, who had been a voice who will talk about some people that people are more progressive may keep as more of a priority. Let's hear what they would have to say. And I figured just to kind of have that yin yang element to it. So,
All
so
right.
stay
I
tuned.
look forward to it. Yeah, look forward to it. And thank you for listening. And you can hear us on all the major places you listen to your podcast: Apple, Spotify, YouTube.
Like and subscribe.
Yes. And comment. We want to hear what you think.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. God bless.